Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Lens presented by Jott-Nyx Paranormal. I'm Jamie. That guy's Chad. We
That's
are
me.
your hosts. Yeah, it is you. Because it's not me, right? Thanks for clarifying. Oh, we're back again. How's the week go by so fast, dude?
Uh, I don't know when you're working 24 hours a day, or it felt like
Wow,
24. It goes by real fast.
that's a fair statement. That is true. That is true. Welcome to the entertainment industry that you're in, right?
Hmm.
Your schedules vary, and then it's feast and famine sometimes, I'm sure.
Yep,
And feast while you can, for sure.
exactly. So,
Okay.
yeah, I was hoping that I would get everything done for the show tonight that I have to do, and I was like rush home and eat. Well, you know how it goes.
I do, absolutely. And then I have a house full of folks here right now, so we're getting everybody settled and situated, and dogs walked, and boom, boom, boom. All
Hmm.
of a sudden it's like 8:40, and I'm like, oh, ooh, I got to do something. So it's what it is, and it's life,
Hmm.
and that's all good too, because everybody's got a schedule, but this is a nice, easy distraction from all that other bunky stuff that we have to
Hmm.
do, and things in the world that we don't like, and all that. So
Yep.
here we go again. So
And we've got something to look forward to this week.
we do.
We're going to be back at the brewery, Booby's
Oh, I thought you
Brewery.
meant sleeping in on Saturday. Oh, yeah, that too. Yes, that
Well,
too.
yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna get to sleep in on. I might have to work. You never know. But
Oh, yeah, that's right.
we do have the investigation, but we'll dig more into that later. So,
Yep. Back for the
um,
first of the year. So
and
that is a big
I'm gonna
deal.
give a shout out to a friend out there. Today is Chris Mendez's birthday, so happy
Get
birthday!
out. He has birthdays?
He does.
Wow.
Maybe one of these days he'll be old enough to not run over, people and at investigations.
I'm glad you said it. I really am. It's never going to get old.
They never. Nope.
Happy birthday, Chris, buddy. I'm happy for you, and I hope you've had a great day out, and we'll catch up and celebrate with you sometime soon.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it for
So
me. Yeah.
yeah, me too. Honestly, it's been a dull week, and not much is going on. Yeah, it's been cold as get out, and
Mhm.
nobody's doing anything. So we're just laying low and getting ready to do stuff. So okay, and then we got that comment. Hi, Bert. It says, in the words of the drunk dad on Independence Day, "Hello, boys."
So good to
Oh
see you,
my,
Bert. And Heather
and
was wishing our friend Chris a happy birthday on Facebook. So there you
very
go.
cool. Yeah. Hey,
So glad you
but
could
we
join us
do.
tonight, Heather and Bert. So
Yeah, thanks for joining. It's funny when you start social media friendships, right? The idea of physical contact, like handing a card to somebody, goes out the window,
hmm
right? Because people are everywhere, and that's the beauty of it.
hmm
You don't have to be in the same space. Chris is a bit to the east of us and just far enough away that it's not easy to catch up physically,
right.
unless we're out somewhere for something, an
hmm
investigation or whatnot. So hence the social media says you can do all that good stuff there, and
hmm See,
expand it a lot.
I cheated, Jamie. I took my birthday off social media, so people can't just do that. They have to reach out to me. And I try to make an effort to either send them a personal message via Messenger or a text message or something like that, because everybody posts it on Facebook.
Yes.
Like,
It depends on the relationship. Well, two things. One, thanks for making me look bad because I send a message on the socials,
that's
and
okay. That,
if you hold on, if you take your birthday off the social media site, does that mean you don't age anymore?
nah,
No,
have you?
yeah,
No,
maybe.
no. I wish.
I mean, it could get worse.
So anyway, we digress. So
All right, all right. Well, speaking of things that are old,
nice segue, Jamie.
let's talk about our topic tonight.
Okay.
Um, we're going to dig into and explore Grimm's fairy tales. So, Chad, do you know any of these things? Have you heard of it before?
I I've heard of them, and I'm sure I know some of them, but I couldn't tell you that they were Grimm's fairy tales. So
Okay.
I
Okay.
remember having some books as a kid.
Sure. I think it's fair to say we probably all have
Hmm.
at least one, or we've been told the tales. We know the tales, whether we were told them or how we learned them.
Hmm.
Some are visual, and I'll get to that.
Right.
Um, but they've been around for a long time.
Is Hansel and Gretel one of them?
Yes,
See?
it is
See?
actually, yes. Yep. And well, we'll get into more of that. But
Yep.
there's a little over 200 of them in total, but
Okay.
they just 84 originally. So it's kind of interesting how they expanded, and I'll get into that as well and the why part of it. But because it is all about the why, I think there's an important thing here that might be overlooked a little bit because of the fact that these have just been 200 years of us having these stories in our cultures. You know,
Hmm.
what part of the world you're from, the stories are familiar. They may have their own twists, and it's folklore. And we've explored enough of that, I think, through all of these episodes to know that folklore and or urban legends, another way of saying it, right,
Right.
exist everywhere. And there's so many of them that are so similar that, it's sort of like a whisper down the lane or telephone game tale,
Hmm.
especially when they're undocumented. The cool thing about the Grimms is that they did document and they continue to do so. And they have therefore saved some of this that would have been lost perhaps or expanded to different directions. And stories change every time they're told. It's a fascinating thing. And I'll even get into how it ties to the paranormal, 'cause that's what we do.
Ooh, okay. Cool.
Let me get to the program part before I'll stop riffing here. Um, Let me start with this. Every fairy tale ends in happily ever after, right?
Mm-mm.
They did to begin with.
Okay.
If you had to recount the story of Cinderella right now, you could probably do it by heart. Wicked stepmother, glass slipper, stroke at midnight, yada yada.
Right.
Probably also reel off the story of Snow White or Little Red Riding Hood without needing to really think about it all too much as well. These stories are pretty well woven into our cultural DNA by now, and a lot of that is due to the work of the Grimm brothers. But the versions we know now aren't the versions that Grimm's originally published, and the stories weren't originally intended for kids at all. Back in the early 1800s, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm were working as librarians. Born into a well off family, their lives took a turn for the worse when their father died, and the brothers struggled through school and the university while in poverty. Librarians weren't particularly paid well, and frankly, they still aren't.
Mm.
But the Grimms were both keen scholars, and their work gave them both time and opportunity to do their own research that led them to put together a collection of folk tales. The stories the Brothers Grimm first collected are brusque, blunt, absurd, comical, and tragic. They are not, strictly speaking, fairy tales. In fact, the Grimms never intended for the tales to be read by children. The tales are about children and their families and how they reacted to the difficult conditions under which they lived. Think about the 1810, 1812 window in Europe.
Hmm.
Things were tough. They're coming through some wars. Think about our home base with the brewery, Booby's Brewery in Mount Joy, PA, right? The Booby
Hmm.
family. Eloise wanted to come over shortly ahead or a little bit more into the future of this, but coming out of a period of rough wars, territorial disputes, things like that. It was an unsettled time, and unfortunately, bad things happen.
Hmm.
So the Grimms thought the stories and their morals emanated naturally from the German people in an oral tradition, and they wanted to preserve them before the tales were lost forever, as I said earlier. Although the young Germans had not entirely formalized their concept of folklore while they worked on the publication of the first edition, they held to their original principle to salvage the relics from the past, stories that were passed along. They intended to trace and grasp the essence of cultural evolution and to demonstrate how natural language stemming from the needs, customs, and rituals of the common people created authentic bonds and helped forge civilized communities. One of the reasons they called their collection of tales an educational manual, and there's a German word here that I'm not even going to try that says that
Oh,
word.
come on.
All right, why not? Erizi Hunchbunch. That's exactly how it sounds. Is that the tales recalled the basic values of the German people through storytelling. The Grimms wanted to gift the oral tales to the German people, not realizing that these tales would assume relevance in all cultures. Though the tales can be considered part of a German nationalist movement in the 19th century, they were also related to tales from many other nations, and this relationship accounts for their international appeal today. Turning to the tales of the first edition, a reader might notice that many of the tales, such as The Hand with the Knife, How Some Children Played at Slaughtering, and The Children of Famine, have nothing to do with fairies or happy endings. Instead, these stark narratives are about brutal living conditions in the 19th century. For instance, The children of famine begins this way. Once upon a time, there was a woman with 2 daughters, and they had become so poor that they no longer had even a piece of bread to put in their mouths. Their hunger became so great that their mother became unhinged and desperate. Indeed, she said to her children, "I've got to kill you so that I can get something to eat." Yeah.
Wow.
In another haunting tale, The Godfather, a poor man in need of a godfather unknowingly chooses the devil, who may eat him after a visit to the devil's house of horrors. There's some themes of the devil being involved in a lot of the tales. These tales were omitted from later editions. From the first edition in 1812, to 1815, to the final one in 1857, the Grimms received numerous versions of tales already in their collection, and new tales from strangers, friends, and colleagues, and they often decided to replace one tale with another version, to delete some of the tales, or to include variants in their footnotes. Interestingly, several Grimm tales were explored in animated feature films by Walt Disney. Let's take a look at these. So the first, Snow White. According to Disney, and I'm assuming we've all seen this, right? Animated,
Mhm.
1922 or so, the heyday of Disney. So, according to Disney, threatened by her stepdaughter's beauty, a wicked stepmother orders a huntsman to take the young girl out into the woods and kill her, bringing back her heart. The huntsman can't do it and lets Snow White escape into the forest. She finds a tiny house where singing dwarves, all named for their defining characteristics, live. They decide to let her stay and keep house for them. How very kind, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The Wicked Queen finds out via her magic mirror that Snow White isn't dead and sets out to kill her with a poisoned apple. Though the dwarves get revenge by driving the queen off the edge of a cliff, they can't wake Snow White until a passing prince comes and wakes her with true love's kiss. And they live happily ever after.
Right.
Sounds right. Sounds like what we know, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
originally, though, in the first edition of the story, it wasn't a wicked stepmother at all. It was Snow White's actual mother. And she didn't just want Snow White's heart, she wanted her lungs and her liver too. When she discovered that the huntsman hadn't killed the girl, she sets out to try to kill her in 3 different ways: with an overly tight corset, suffocating her; with a poison comb, don't know what that would do, but okay; and finally with, well, a poisoned apple. It's also not true love's kiss that revives Snow White, it's a good shake, as the prince attempts to make off with Snow White's glass coffin. And the queen doesn't get pushed off a cliff. She's forced to dance herself to death in a pair of red-hot iron shoes. Ouch. Interesting, eh?
Yeah. Hmm.
And next, Cinderella. Favorite, right? Everybody
Yeah.
loves Cinderella. They can sing I'm hearing the song, in my
Bippity
head.
boppity boo. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, according to Disney, after her widowed father remarries and then dies, Cinderella is left at the mercy of her wicked stepmother and 2 ugly stepsisters. They
Hmm.
force her to do manual and wear rags, but she's so sweet and kind and beautiful that even wild animals love her and help her out. Where are those for me? Like, I'm sweet and kind, and never mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Apparently not sweet enough. When the prince of the kingdom throws a ball, Cinderella's fairy godmother appears and creates a dress, coach, and footman for her so she can go to the party. The prince falls in love with her, but the magic ends at midnight, so she has to run away, leaving behind only her glass slipper. The prince travels the land looking for the girl who fits the shoe, but her stepsisters sabotage her by smashing it. Luckily, she still has the other shoe, so she gets to live happily ever after too. Right?
Hmm.
Sound right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, not originally. The Cinderella story originally appeared in the volume of Charles Perrault's Fairy Tales, but in the Grimm's version, Cinderella, or Aschenputtel, or Ashful, has 2 beautiful stepsisters, and they just happen to be ugly, horrible people. There's no fairy godmother, just white doves sent to help Cinderella by her dead mother. Okay.
Okay.
Paranormal, perhaps?
Yeah.
And the prince actually holds 3 balls. At midnight on the 3rd night, the prince lays a tar trap for Cinderella, where she loses her shoe. instead of it slipping off.
Okay.
When her sisters get the chance to try on the missing shoe, they each cut off different parts of their feet in order to fit into the tiny slipper. But the blood dripping from the shoes gives them away. The prince eventually finds the girl, and at their wedding, the magic doves reappear to peck out the evil sister's eyes.
See, now what's interesting is, are you familiar with Into the Woods, the
Of
musical?
course, I'm going to get there actually. So
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that was through this for me the whole time.
Uh
And just for reference, we have not gotten through an episode of the show in the last several weeks without having a musical reference of some kind. So
huh.
what the heck? But yes, absolutely. There's definitely themes, and I think that's the point.
Hmm.
Because there's so much of this can be kind of tagged, different ways. They overlay each other similarly anyway.
Right.
A lot of the stories. All right, so the next, Sleeping Beauty. According to Disney, a king and queen throw a huge party to celebrate the birth of their daughter Aurora. But though they invite 3 good fairies who each give their blessings, they didn't invite the evil fairy Maleficent. Angry about being snubbed, she crashes the party and bestows upon the girl a curse. Before she turns 16, she'll prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. One of the good fairies manages to modify the curse so that Aurora won't die. She'll just sleep until she's awoken by true love's kiss. Yeah, that again.
Yeah.
Eh. The fairies try to hide the girl, and she eventually meets and sings to the prince in the forest. But curses don't get hidden, can't be hidden from, and so she ends up pricking her finger and falling asleep anyway. Maleficent locks the prince in her dungeon so he can't break the curse, but the good fairies rescue him. Maleficent turns into a dragon because, why not? But the prince pushes her off a cliff and wakes Aurora with a kiss. There must be a lot of cliffs in Germany. That's 2 now. Hmm.
Hmm.
And now cue the happily ever after music.
Right.
Originally, though, this is actually an interesting one because the Grimm version of the story is pretty close to the Disney version. But there's a magic frog at the beginning, there's 13 fairies instead of 3, and there's a lot of dead suitors stuck in the forest surrounding the castle. Otherwise, the story is pretty familiar.
Hmm.
However, the story was also published by other authors before the Grimms got their hands on it, and those versions are pretty nasty. Here's some examples. In Giambattista's version from 1634, once the prince finds Sleeping Beauty, he rapes her. And she only wakes up when one of the children she bore whilst asleep sucks the splinter out of her finger by mistake.
Okay.
Horrible. And though Peralta's version in 1697, removes the rapes, it chucks in an epilogue with an evil stepmother who tries to eat the happy couple's children and ends up being thrown into a pit of vipers. It really says something when the Grimm's version is nicer than the others, right?
Hmm.
So,
So which story is, what's the name of the Grimm story?
hang on. I'll
Okay.
have to check my reference material. It's quite a tome. Honestly, I don't know off the top of my head. It's not. It's not
Okay.
necessarily
Because
similar. And
it's
well, the thing is this: the original. If you get the original 64, and it's hard to find an original version in a copy anymore because it's forever old. The names are different.
okay.
The stories, as they've been modified through the years, the names are changing and
Okay.
giving it a spin of some kind or another.
Because it sounds like the same theme as Rumpelstiltskin, but it's, I don't think it, that's a separate one, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely is.
Okay.
All right. The next, Rapunzel. According to Disney, and Disney's adaptation of Rapunzel is called Tangled.
Hmm.
It's very recent and it's not very traditional. Rapunzel gets a lot more agency than most other Disney princesses, and her prince isn't really a prince at all. But the elements of a sanitized Rapunzel story are there. A beautiful princess is kept captive by a witch who uses a girl's long hair to climb in and out of a tower prison, and it's only when she meets a man that she gets to escape.
Fair.
Simple. Originally, according to the Grimms, the reason the Wicked Witch gets to make off with baby Rapunzel is that her dad stole herbs from the witch's garden to meet his wife's cravings. And when he gets caught, he agrees to hand over his firstborn. Now, Chad, this sounds a lot like Into the Woods, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
Yes. Stuck in the tower, Rapunzel lets down her hair for the witch day after day, but when a passing prince hears her singing, he decides to pay Rapunzel a visit himself. He secretly visits her several times, and the witch only finds out because Rapunzel gets pregnant, and innocently asks why her belly is getting so big. In a rage, the witch cuts off the girl's hair, uses it to lure the prince back into the tower, then chucks him off the top, letting him fall into a thorn bush that plucks out his eyes. Eventually, though, there's a happy ending where the couple get back together, and Rapunzel's tears heal the prince's eyes.
Yep, that sounds very much like Into the Woods. Sondheim went back to the traditional, huh?
Yeah, who knew?
So, Heather wants to know, why does eating children seem to be so popular?
They're delicious. A little barbecue, some salt and pepper, done. They're smaller. They don't take long to cook. I don't know. It's the weirdest part of it. I mean, other than gruesome deaths, I don't think that there's anything weirder than the desired, and it's common in a lot of
Mhm.
stories. There is, well, I'm getting maybe a little ahead of myself here to say this, but there's a prevalence of child abuse through most of these stories. But you're also looking at an era when child abuse isn't what we would consider it today. It was just discipline.
Right.
So that's part of it as well. And perhaps it was the threat of being eaten more so than it was the fact of it as the behavior modifier.
Okay.
Maybe. Or maybe there's 8 kids. I don't know. Okay. So here are some other examples of how stories changed between the first and fourth editions of the Grimm's work. And that's a difference between 1810, 1812, and 1847. So the big gap in between.
Right.
The terse tale called The Wild Man, in which a mysterious, powerful king helps a boy who has helped him escape from a cage, is embellished and transformed into a very long, elaborate tale that is now called Iron Hands. The Wild Man in the 1812 version is more kind than the stern Iron Hands, who determines the young man's destiny in a coming of age story. He's a bit hard on him.
Hmm.
Likewise, The Devil in the Green Coat is given a new title, Bearskin, and totally a new beginning and meaning. In the 1812 tale, the Grimms portrayed an oppressed, timid young man abandoned in the woods by his brothers. He accepts the devil's green coat that will enable him to survive for 7 years if he doesn't shave or clean himself. Clearly, he's a teenager. He's cool with that, right?
Right.
Yeah. In the much longer 1857 version, there are echoes of the Napoleonic Wars. The protagonist is a discharged and homeless soldier who is treated poorly by his family and then turns to the devil for survival. All of the tales in the first edition bear the marks of their diverse storytellers who believed in the magic, superstitions, and miraculous transformations of the tales. It may be difficult for us to understand why this is the case, but for the storytellers and writers of these tales, the stories contain truths about the living conditions of their times. The tales in the first edition were collected not from peasants, as it is commonly believed, but mainly from literate people whom the Grimms came to know quite well. Evidence shows that these stories often were obtained from illiterate or anonymous informants, though, but they were passed through to them by more, what I'll call, reputable people.
Hmm.
Even if they did not know their informants, the Grimms came to trust almost everyone who contributed to their collection. It is this mutual trust that marks the tales as something special and endows them with a certain humanity, what Germans call Menschlichkeit, and it is mutual trust among folklorists in the 19th century that marks it as a golden age of folk and fairy tales. The tales in the first edition set a certain standard that the collectors began to follow and still follow even today. Let me give a fun fact while we're at this.
Okay.
Their books would become second in popularity only to the Bible in German-speaking lands. By the 20th century, they would become the most famous collection of folk and fairy tales in the Western world. That's impressive.
Yeah.
So, to conclude, in gathering the tales, the Grimms made a unique contribution to folklore, and their Kinder und Hammerstein, which is Children in the Household Tales, it's originally called, is even listed by UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, in its Memory of the World Registry. So it is a protected entity now.
Okay.
It was in large part because of their first edition, published in 2 volumes in 1812 and 1815, that inspired folklorists in Europe and Great Britain, because Great Britain's not in Europe apparently, to gather tales from their oral traditions to preserve as part of their cultural heritage. Though brusque and raw, the Grimm's tales of the first edition still resonate with us today because they indicate how we can transform ourselves and our conditions to live in a better world. As philologists, collectors, translators, researchers, editors, and mediators, the Grimms worked in the hope that their tales would benefit us in unimaginable ways, and indeed, it is this hope that can still be felt when we read and listen to their tales today. Before we discuss, let me cite some sources. Britannica.com, NEH.gov, which is the National Endowment for the Humanities, thethings.com, and what might be in my new favorite website, Chad, denofgeek.com. Check it out.
Atlas Obscura is going to be missing a client.
I can do both, I'm sure.
Okay.
So there's a lot, right? And it's
Hmm.
interesting considering there's 200 plus stories now. But even if we're only 86, I think there would still be a lot going on. What do you think?
I think it's definitely interesting how they changed through their different publications to evolve with the times. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't. There's not a lot that we can say here. Is it paranormal or not?
true.
There's a few things, but I just think
Well,
it's interesting though how it evolved and how it was probably meant as lessons. And I think like the eating children thing, it was probably don't do that or you might get eaten by blah blah, whatever.
sure.
So, and I'm not familiar with that time period in Germany, but you know, I'm guessing that it was, the food was scarce,
Hmm.
and it was like, well, if you're not careful, you'll be the next meal.
Sure. Well,
Like,
you're also talking about rural areas, that weren't well, kind of like we talked about with the children of Woolpit, the Green Children of Woolpit last week. The wolf pits, as they were,
uh-huh.
were protection against the things that were around them that they couldn't control. You know,
Right.
so these are still rural, very rural places, and rural tales start in rural areas, start to grow, and then they get passed along as people travel through, and it
Hmm.
gives them some sense of fantasticalism. That's a word I
Right.
just made up. You can use it if you need it. Um, and it just kind of expands and it goes from there. But it's a challenge to challenge whether it's paranormal or not. I'll say this: the tales involve such things as sorcery, magic, witchcraft, fairies, dwarves, fairy godmothers, which are technically are fairies but still separate,
Right. Yeah.
ghosts, dragons, and my favorite, dark, spooky woods.
Well, dark spooky woods aren't paranormal. Well, they
They
exist.
can
We
be
just
though.
they can be spooky, but they might have paranormal things in anyway.
Right.
Bert says
I'm
he didn't.
stretching that last one, but still, I still like dark, spooky woods anyway.
Yeah. Bert said he didn't realize that there were so many and that some of them were from the 1600s.
Yeah, and
So,
so the interesting thing, and I think this was what's kind of to your point of like how the stories changed, is that they didn't own these stories to begin with. They were not the authors; they were the
right,
tellers
right.
and the collectors. And in that, they were, I guess, bound to some degree to tell the tale as it was shared, and then the liberty afterwards to change it as other versions applied, were
Hmm.
applied to them, and hence the different editions that came through. If you've been watching the slideshow with us, there is countless versions and editions beyond the original from the Grimms, and as we've moved forward in time, the stories haven't really, yeah, really changed. They've been edited, and
Right.
updated. Probably a better way of saying it to get to the more modernization that we've come to. But and of course, many have had illustrations added. Um, there are movie versions of them of everything, obviously outside of the Disney stuff. But
Right.
there's a Brothers Grimm movie, Matt Damon and Heath Ledger are in it. There's versions of other tales, Hansel and Gretel, Vampire Hunter. is one of them.
Hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
what the heck? But that's not from that long ago. It has Jeremy Renner in it, so an actor of our day. So it's an early film for him, but still, not that far back in our past. So, and you go back in time, a lot of stuff through the years have been done.
Right.
Stage productions, of course. Mentioned Into the Woods, an adaptation for the most part.
Right.
Of a lot of stories combined. If you get a chance to go see it, go see it. It's well done.
Hmm.
Um, it's just one of those things where when you don't own it, but you want to honor it. This is exactly what they did,
Right.
and the tales were presented as they were told.
Yeah. Bert says I
Oh,
like the Grimm TV show.
yep. Um, oh gosh, what was it? Once Upon a Time, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Hmm.
Once, maybe it was just called Once on ABC a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Where there was a
there was
fairy
an
tale.
Emmett assassination for quite a while. So
Exactly. I
in our house,
remember. It was
yeah,
actually it was a good show. I mean, I
it
enjoyed it.
was. It was well done. Yeah,
It was bringing a classic into modern day. So it was an interesting twist. So
absolutely.
um,
So, and I think, these tales are now part of our culture,
mhm.
and whether we acknowledge them or not, sometimes we don't even know they're Grimm's tales anymore
Well, and
because,
I think that's I was realizing that as you were going through them, I was like, oh yeah, that one I know, that one I know.
yep.
Hmm.
And I had this thought, if they did not do the work and, weren't in the place to do this and at their time and era, would these tales still be something that's common or popular to us today? Would they have made their way to us anyway?
Hmm.
Maybe, but not as likely. So,
Right,
we got to tip the cap here, I think, to the Grimms and um, really, give them their flowers for this because
right.
it's amazing how long these stories have held up. And Chad, there's not to step back a little bit, but there's a certain magic in folklore, because
Right.
everything is believable in the tale.
Hmm.
You know, I'm not. I've never watched any of these, classic Disney films and went, nah, that's not possible, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
just part of the tale, and it's cool, and we get absorbed in it, and we just let our imaginations go with it. And obviously, they
Hmm.
all have happy endings, so it's pretty cool. But
Right.
we just accept and we go, and it's neat.
Hmm. Yeah. It is interesting how they did document. They did, because there's so many stories that would be cool if people did that now.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and we do to some degree,
mhm.
but now it's not a book so much as it is digital media. You know, um, social media for sure, but
Right.
like YouTube and other places that you can create a video, and upload it, and it's to the world in seconds.
Right.
It took time for this to carry out of Germany. First of all, took time to carry across Germany, but
Right.
then move forward and out of there, out of the country into the rest of the continent, and then around the rest of the world.
Hmm.
So it's amazing to me, in an
Right.
era without any kind of reach other than just carrying a book in your bag,
Mhm.
kind of thing, that this expanded so fast and far and stuck so hard.
I guess you bring up a good point that like social media is doing this now for us,
Hmm.
and like I grew up south of Gettysburg, that, and there's there's the orphanage in Gettysburg, but growing up there, I never knew the um,
Right.
the orphanage existed, any of the story about it, but through social media, more so than even any of the TV shows, is when I started learning about it. I'm like, wait, what? And
Yep.
like, it was right across the street from a place that I'd been multiple times and knew nothing of it. And, now I've gotten the chance to investigate it. So it's really, I think we're living in a time where you're right, this is happening, but just in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's my opinion anyway. But I can see it, with respects to like even mass media shows. Like I learn, I see up, and I watched, say a Josh Gates show, whatever they are, Expedition,
Right.
this, that, there's so
Yep.
many names, Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, all of that stuff. I get excited to watch those shows because I get to learn about a place I know nothing about,
Mhm.
Or what's really cool is when they do a place you've been to,
Uh-huh.
and you're like, wow, wow, I saw that, I did that, or I never
Or
saw that.
or or when you're going to and you're like, "Ooh, this is a
Oh
good
yeah, well
primer."
that too. Yeah, that's true. You know, uh, this season premiere of Expedition Unknown was Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. So,
Mhm.
and a two-part episode at that. So, I got super excited knowing I was going,
Uh-huh.
in a couple months. So,
Yeah, and then I
that
then I think I was watching it, I'm like, "Jamie, do you know what's on?" And you're like, "Wait till the end."
wait till the end of the second episode. Yep. But that's the point. There's a tale. Every one of those is a version of a tale that has a collective.
Right.
And we are in this mix ourselves with what
Mhm.
we get to do at Booby's Brewery.
Mhm.
There is a tale of the establishment. There is a
Mhm.
tale of the people who were there and the activities that they created while they were there and the things that they did that energies have captured and remained. We get to tell that tale every time we have a public investigation.
Yep.
We're spreading folklore
Mhm.
and expanding it anyway to others.
Yeah.
And I don't look at it that way because we're sharing information, but that's really what it is.
That's what folklore was, and it was verbal telling, and so but, yeah, and there
We are professional folklorists now,
we
right?
are yeah, so
Sort of. I
well
mean, no, I'm kidding, but
well, and,
you can
we
actually get a degree in folklore, by the way.
really?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
It's fascinating.
Hmm,
So
cool.
there it is.
Yeah, and
And I like this actually what Bert just
yeah,
commented here, but also keeping their memory alive. Absolutely.
yeah.
And that's the tale of all of these things. That's the
Mhm.
point perhaps of all of these stories. And the names may not be the names of the originals, but the idea is that we're sharing that story of someone
Yeah,
and remembering them.
so well, and we're doing, some things to keep it alive in other ways. I'm working on the Jott-Nyx paranormal website,
Mhm.
but we're also going to have, we're digging in and researching things about the brewery. I'm planning on posting things like the death certificate of Aloise and just things that we've found and discovered over the years that we can share and make sure that everybody's aware of.
Right.
So
That's a repository. And
right.
that's exactly what this is. It's a repository of stories.
Hmm.
And these editions. And even though they have been modified from first to the fourth edition or so, and that's progression, I think, more than it
Hmm.
is intention of just not liking it. And how many times have you written, something and as a first draft, and then by the time you're at your final, it's not the same anymore.
Right.
Commonly, right?
Hmm.
Pretty much everything we do for these shows, it's everything I do at least starts off over here and it ends
Uh-huh.
up over there. So,
Yep.
um, but the more you learn about something, the more information you glean and gather, the more you can expand and
Right.
contour where you're
Right.
going with it. And we all have our own unique ways of telling stories as well. And
Right.
I think that's key to this. The Grimms had a unique way of wanting to tell stories. And not everything that they captured or were provided to them was documented in their books. There's quite a few, and I thought one of them was really interesting. The tale Puss in Boots, which I think we all know.
Hmm.
We certainly know from Shrek, right? The
Right.
character, at least. And there's another one, right?
Right.
Another kind of conglomerate of a bunch of fairy tales. Um, but that was considered too French for them. They didn't include it in the first edition.
Oh, real interesting.
Yeah. So, and there's a few others that were also
Hmm.
considered too French. There were some that were considered too um, Middle Eastern as well that didn't make it into the first or second edition, but more
Interesting.
so toward the end.
Right.
So, and as the globalization of it all kind of expanded and more stories kept coming in, they realized they had to keep continuing to expand out. And that's how they went from 86 to like 210 pretty quick
Hmm.
as far as stories. So
Now,
it's
did
fascinating.
so obviously the Grimm brothers haven't lived forever. Like, are the stories being? Is it family that's carrying on some of the new publications, or is it
There, to my knowledge, there was no
okay?
continuation of the family in the processes of the
Okay.
editions.
So publishers sort of purchased it, and then they
Yeah.
however that worked in the 1800s.
Yeah, so how if it worked at all, right?
Right.
I don't know that they made much money on these. Obviously the books were sold,
Right.
But in the sense of royalties and all of the stuff that we expect today and how we know it today,
Hmm.
the trackability is one thing too. Like you would really only need a printing press to be able to create a book, and that's not a small feat in the 1800s. I
No.
know,
No.
it's a big setup and all that, but if you took a book from here, in our area in Pennsylvania, and it traveled with you to, say, the Midwest of the U.S., somewhere like Nebraska,
Hmm.
and somebody liked it and they wanted to make it themselves, that's all they had to do. There weren't copyright laws and protections and stuff. It was just,
Right.
let's go print this ourselves.
Hmm.
And then it would. And
Right.
then it would. But the good news of that is it would allow it to go further faster that
Right.
way than it would be if it just came from a single source with a very small distribution network or any network at all.
Right. Right.
You'd have to come to them to get it.
Hmm.
So there's
Yeah.
possibly some good in that.
Yeah. Again,
There's not any
interesting how.
money.
What's that?
There's no money in it
Sure.
for the Grimms.
Yeah. It's just interesting how times have changed. Globalization and you know.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you could write a book tomorrow, Jamie, and it would be worldwide within a couple years.
It might be in a couple weeks. I mean,
Right.
realistically, with digital release,
Hmm.
you know, all it has to do, and we can, this is a different direction, but our good friend Ron Yacovetti is a 5-time author. His
Hmm.
books are available on Amazon. I don't have to go find him to get a copy. I can just dial it up and say I look him up in the search, and there they are.
Yep. Yep.
You know, and I've
Yeah.
I've put
If
them
you
on
want
wish
that
lists for
signed
birthdays and
copy,
gifts time. So
yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. What was that?
I was gonna say if you want that signed copy, though.
Well, that's different, right?
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. But that is the world now. Is that
Right.
that you don't have to go through the arduous process of and first of all, you're writing on a typewriter. You're not writing on a typewriter with a quill as they would have been.
Right.
Now we're using everything on our tablets and laptops, and we can do that anywhere and anytime.
Hmm.
We don't have to go with a printout of everything in hand to an editor who has to then go through their process and then
Right.
get it back to you in assuming with a bunch of red marks on it, you know,
Hmm.
and then you go back to your work and you re-edit and you really redo and
Yeah.
represent. That's long and slow.
Yeah.
Everything is digital now, and it's
But
amazing.
but Jamie, it wasn't that long ago that we were still doing hand manuscripts.
That's true. I agree.
I
I
mean,
agree. It's certainly in our lifetime.
yeah.
That's the point. And the world has changed rapidly
Right.
over the last this within this generation,
So
and I wonder what it will be going forward.
right. So we've
It
definitely
allows
rabbit
it
holed
just
this
allows
one.
for the rapid expansion of the information that we are trying to present, and
Right.
even us, we're around the world with this program. It's
Hmm.
amazing to me. Like
Hmm.
I'm shocked.
I don't
By
know
that.
if you noticed, but it's 22 countries now.
I have,
Uh-huh.
and thank you all. We really, really
Appreciate
appreciate that.
that. Yeah. So.
Yep. So very cool. But that's the point, right?
Hmm.
There's no lines anymore. It's not like we're watching network television back in the 70s where there were so many episodes and over the summer it was reruns and then you had to wait for everything. Now everything is just streams at all times and you're
Hmm.
picking in where you're picking and going wherever you want to. It's amazing.
Yeah. So
What a great time to be alive.
because
So
people like us have a platform, Jamie. So
all right.
on
Well
that.
that's what I have. I appreciate the
Okay.
opportunity to present on this. I
Yeah.
was it's always been an interest of mine, and then
Hmm.
the original tales truly are not what we know today.
Oh, definitely not. So
They all start with once upon a time, but they certainly all did not live happily ever after.
yeah, because not many stories are happily ever after.
Nope,
So
it's
real
true.
life isn't happily ever after.
Not always. Agreed.
So so on that note, thank you, Jamie, for pulling this together. Definitely interesting. Um,
Cool.
nice job.
Thanks.
But coming up, we've got a couple more interesting episodes. Um, Let me see. Of course, I've got my camera in front of it. Next week, I will be doing the Rendlesham Forest incident. You don't know anything about this,
I
do you,
got
Jamie?
nothing on this one. I'm not looking it up. I'm just going to let it ride.
Well, we're
Enlighten
we're
me, sir.
we're back to Suffolk and Suffolk, England.
Okay. I
So,
figured it sounded British. It did.
uh,
All right.
1980s.
Oh, okay.
So I'll just leave that there, and we'll go
All
with
right.
that. But yeah,
I'm
not
I'm expecting people with, 2 polo shirts with pop collars and some parachute pants and Chuck Taylors. All
so.
right.
Yeah, we'll see. Um, so anyway, we'll dig into that next week. Um, March 4th, as we move into Mardi Gras, right?
Yeah, well, it's Fat Tuesday,
Fat
so
Tuesday.
the end of Mardi Gras, really.
True. Yeah.
Getting rid of all
As
the
we move,
stuff.
yeah, as we're moving into Lent,
Yes.
but the end of Mardi Gras, Jamie's going to dig into New Orleans, America's most haunted city. The week after that, I'm going to jump into Leap Castle.
That
Got
never
to do
gets
it
old.
every time. Um, March 18th, Tommy Knockers, which I didn't know what this was. I had to, as I was looking up to make sure I had the spelling right, which I didn't.
No.
um, I figured out what that is.
Okay.
And then we're sort of tying a couple things together here as we move on. I'm going to do the Dybbuk box, and then Jamie's going to do paranormal hoaxes. So maybe that gives you a clue to the Dybbuk box.
Right.
And then Jamie, believe it or not, after that we're into Tala and stuff.
We are
So
there.
so
We're getting every day is getting closer.
well, it is, yep. So that's what we got coming up in our shows. Um, Paranormal investigations. We're here, Jamie. We're back.
Yes, let's do it.
This Saturday, February 22nd at the brewery. Tickets are limited. They're I'm not going to say we're selling out fast, but the
They're
numbers are
dwindling. Yep.
yeah. Um,
They
March
they always
20
seem to go quickly closer to the dates as well, as people
exactly.
finalize their weekend plans and, say, "Let's
Yeah.
do this." So,
So then we're March 22nd, exactly 4 weeks later, we're back again. Then the next thing after that will be our trip to Tala, which we are all looking forward to. And then April 26th, we will be back at the brewery. Tickets are available if you go to boobiesbrewery.com. That's BUBES brewery.com /entertainment. And that'll take you to their Saver Stub site, and you can get tickets there. Let's see what else we've got. In May 17th, we will be pairing up with. We're going to start some of our para-unity things. Stacy and Gary Smith from this is where I'm going to Land and Legends Paranormal. We'll be teaming up with Jott-Nyx, and we will be doing a co-investigation with the public. It'll be a lot of fun. I know Stacy fairly well. We've met it several times. Gary's a nice guy. I know Missy has done some investigating with them as well. So it'll be a fun night. If you want to learn more about Stacy, she has a podcast, Rustic Spirit Podcast. It's on Facebook and stuff. So look that up and check it out. Again, that'll be that'll be a fun night. Private investigations at Boobies Brewery are available if you're interested in having the brewery to yourself. Once the restaurant closes, you get the brewery to yourself. You can dive into that. To book that experience, reach out to Melissa Keller, which is mkeller0606 @gmail.com. She can get you hooked up with that. There's places to stay because, Jamie, Mountjoy is more fun when you sleep over.
yes, it is. That's true.
So,
Way to
we got
go.
that going for us. There's a
Like
hotel.
17 tries later, Chad. Way to go.
Yeah, well,
Way to
I
go.
have my cheat
Bravo.
sheets now. There's a hotel still at the brewery, and there's also an Airbnb across the street. Both great options to stay. So check that out. And last but not least, follow us on the socials. You found us on Facebook or YouTube. We're starting to pick up posts on our TikTok, which is at Jott-Nyx Paranorma. No L on the end of that. But if you search Jott-Nyx Paranormal, you will find us. We're on Instagram. You can email Jamie and I at paranormallenspodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Spotify, Audible, Apple Podcasts, all those fun places. And you can check out our link tree, which links all these things together under one roof at linktree /paranormal lens. So there you go.
It's a lot.
Any, yeah.
Yeah.
And any other thoughts, Jamie?
Not really. I think I'm just gonna, grab my copy of the fairy tales and go start reading some ones I haven't read before. So
Right before
I
bed?
encourage everyone to do so. Really, there are so many tales and so many things. It's obviously things we know, but there's some unique themes in some of these stories that, um, just really are worth reading and worth digging
Mhm.
into. So
Okay.
please
But
do.
not necessarily bedtime stories, though, right?
Well, I mean, it depends. Maybe some. I don't know. Not for all, for sure. So you definitely want to read them with the lights on.
This is true. So,
No, I got.
uh,
I'm good. Thank you all for joining us again as always. And I'm always one to say this, but if there's a topic you wish to hear us present on your behalf, or that you feel near and dear to, drop us that line. Paranormal Lens Podcast at gmail.com. We certainly were happy to do so. We've done listener submissions before. We'll do more future. We self-produce, so we can move our schedule around. All those episodes you saw coming up can get adjusted, and see a little time to do some research. And perhaps we'll have you on as well as a guest. So it's certainly. We're always looking for more content. There's a lot out there in the world of paranormals. We're never going to run out. But the more we know, the more we can do. So
right.
appreciate that.
We
If you
want to
have it,
feed
let us
you.
know.
We want to feed stuff back to you that you're interested in.
Absolutely.
So
Oh my, what a comment from Heather here. If
great
you
one
read
to
them
close it
before
out
going
on.
to bed, you will dream of eating children. Oh my goodness.
So,
Maybe.
so. All right. Well, on that note, I want to thank Jamie again. Thank you for pulling this together. I want to thank all our viewers who are with us live and who are going to be watching this in the future. If you're watching this some other time, you want to join us live, that way you can add comments and stuff. It's Tuesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're here. So
Yep.
join us. So.
Very good.
All right. Well, Jamie, I know where you're going to be Saturday night, and I'm going to be
Yep.
at the same place. So we're looking
Yeah.
forward to that. So,
I'll see you there. Same place, same. We'll be in the same place at the same time for once. This is great.
yep. So, all right. Good night,
Well,
everybody. Thank you.
have a great week. See ya.